The Vraxian Empire had controlled the galaxy for 3,000 years. Nobody had ever challenged them. Not once. Their massive sensor networks spread across 100 different star systems, constantly watching, constantly scanning. They were looking for threats that honestly never showed up. It was boring work, really. The same readings, day after day, year after year. Senior Monitor Calrix sat at his station like he did every day. He'd been doing this job for 40 years. 40 years of staring at screens, watching little dots move predictably through space. On this particular Tuesday cycle, something appeared on his screen that made his 3 hearts skip a beat. "What in the?" he whispered, leaning closer to his monitor. The reading didn't make sense. He checked it once, then twice, then a third time, recalibrating every instrument he had. The numbers stayed the same. Something was coming toward them from the outer rim of the galaxy. But it wasn't moving like anything he'd ever seen before. The acceleration alone should have turned whatever ship it was into a cloud of atoms. Nothing could move that fast and stay in one piece. The energy signature was even more terrifying. It burned across his monitors like someone had lit a star on fire and thrown it at them. In 40 years of service, through 3 different wars and countless military exercises, Calrix had never encountered anything remotely like this. His hands shook as he opened the communication channel. "Commander Vex, we have a serious situation here. You need to see this immediately." Commander Vex arrived within minutes, took one look at the readings and his face went pale. "Contact the other outpost. Verify this isn't some kind of equipment failure." But it wasn't a failure. Within the next hour, 3 more monitoring stations reported the exact same thing. An unknown vessel, moving impossibly fast, heading straight toward the heart of the Vraxian Empire. Even worse, it was ignoring every single attempt they made to communicate with it. No response to hails. No identification signals. Nothing. Just silent, terrifying speed. The news hit the Imperial Palace like a bomb. Emperor Drell immediately called an emergency meeting of the War Council. The council chamber filled with the Empire's greatest military minds, their faces grim as they studied the incoming data. Emperor Drell stood at the head of the massive table, his voice sharp with authority. "What species has the audacity to approach our territory without announcing themselves? Who dares?" Chief Admiral Thorne pulled up holographic displays showing the vessel's trajectory and energy output. His expression grew more troubled with each passing second. "Your Majesty, that's the problem. We don't know. The energy signature doesn't match anything in our database. And our database contains information on every known spacefaring civilization in the galaxy. This is completely new." "How is that possible?" one of the generals demanded. "It gets worse," Thorne continued. "The power output we're detecting exceeds our entire 7th Fleet combined. That's 300 warships worth of energy coming from a single vessel." Emperor Drell's eyes narrowed. "This has to be a sensor malfunction. Our instruments must be misreading the data." "We considered that, Your Majesty," Thorne replied carefully. "But we're seeing identical readings from 4 completely independent monitoring stations, each using different sensor technology. The chances of all of them malfunctioning in exactly the same way are essentially 0. The council chamber went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. The Empire's leadership sat frozen, trying to process what they were hearing. For 3,000 years, the Vraxian Empire had been the undisputed power in the galaxy. They had the biggest fleet, the most advanced weapons, and the strongest military tradition. Nothing frightened them because nothing could challenge them. Until now. Panic began spreading through the government like wildfire. Junior officers whispered in corners, trading wild theories. Some suggested it might be an ancient weapon from the old wars, somehow reactivated after being dormant for millennia. Others talked about dimensional invaders from parallel universes. A few even wondered if it might be a natural phenomenon they'd simply never encountered before, maybe some kind of cosmic entity or energy being. But deep down they all knew the truth. This was a ship. And ships meant intelligence. Ships meant civilization. Ships meant someone out there had technology that made theirs look primitive. Emperor Drell slammed his fist on the table, silencing the nervous chatter. "Enough speculation. We are the Vraxian Empire. We have ruled this galaxy for 3 millennia because we are strong, because we are prepared, and because we do not back down from challenges. Dispatch the 7th Fleet immediately. Have them intercept this vessel at the Kelradin Nebula. Whatever this thing is, whoever is piloting it, they're about to learn why we've remained in power for so long." The admirals and generals nodded, some of them looking relieved to finally have orders, to finally have something concrete to do. The 7th Fleet was their pride and joy, 300 of the most advanced warships ever built. Surely that would be enough to handle one mysterious vessel, no matter how strange its readings were. As the meeting broke up and officers rushed to their posts, Chief Admiral Thorne lingered behind. He pulled up the sensor data one more time, studying it with the eye of someone who'd spent 50 years in military service. Something about this felt wrong. Very wrong. Back at his monitoring station, Kelrix watched the mysterious vessel continue its approach. The fleet was mobilizing, moving into position to intercept. But something made his stomach turn with dread. The vessel wasn't slowing down. Not even a little bit. If anything, according to his instruments, it was still accelerating. He pulled up the projected intercept course and ran the calculations 3 times, hoping he'd made a mistake. He hadn't. At its current speed and trajectory, the vessel would reach the fleet's position in approximately 72 hours. And then they would all find out exactly what they were dealing with. Kelrix had a terrible feeling that the Vraxian Empire's 3,000-year reign of unchallenged supremacy was about to come to a very sudden end. Commander Beth Morgan had seen a lot in her lifetime. 200 years of military service, if you counted the time in stasis between campaigns. She'd commanded fleets through 3 major wars, fought against pirates, rebels, and hostile alien species. She knew war. She knew ships. She knew tactics. Standing on the bridge of the Vraxian flagship Eternal Dominion, she felt confident. Maybe too confident. The 7th Fleet stretched out around her like a steel wall in space. 300 warships, each one a masterpiece of Vraxian military engineering. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and her flagship dreadnought at the center. They'd positioned themselves at the edge of the Calridan Nebula, a perfect choke point. Whatever was coming their way would have to pass through them. There was no way around it. Morgan studied the tactical display for what felt like the 100th time. Everything was in position. Every ship knew its role. They'd run these intercept formations 1,000 times in drills. This should be straightforward. Commander, we're detecting a distortion in subspace, her tactical officer called out. Something's coming through. All ships ready weapons, Morgan ordered calmly. But hold fire. Let's see what we're dealing with first. The main view screen flickered as it adjusted to track the incoming vessel. Space seemed to shimmer and twist like looking through water. Then it appeared. Morgan's breath caught in her throat. She actually took a step back. The vessel was tiny. Maybe 1/3 the size of their smallest frigates. In terms of mass, it should have been nothing more than a scout ship or maybe a courier vessel. But her instruments were going absolutely crazy. Power readings that made no sense. Energy signatures that shouldn't be possible. The numbers on her screen were so high she thought the sensors had broken. Run a full diagnostic on all sensor systems, she snapped. These readings can't be accurate. Already done, Commander, her chief engineer replied, his voice shaking slightly. 3 times. The sensors are working perfectly. Those readings are real. Morgan stared at the ship on the screen. It was beautiful in a strange way. The hull was smooth with curves that seemed almost organic, like something grown rather than built. She couldn't see any weapons. No missile tubes, no cannon ports, no torpedo launchers. Nothing. There weren't even any visible shield generators, and every ship in the galaxy needed shields. The strange vessel moved through space in a way that made her head hurt. It glided and turned with impossible grace, like a bird riding air currents. But there was no air in space. The maneuvers it was pulling should require massive thruster arrays, engines the size of buildings. She couldn't detect any thrusters at all. Sir, I'm pulling up the design in our archives, said Kent, her xenobiologist. He was young, fresh out of the academy, but sharp. His fingers flew across his console. Those markings on the hull. I recognize them. They're Earth symbols. The entire bridge went quiet. Officers stopped what they were doing and turned to stare. Earth? Morgan said slowly. She almost wanted to laugh. You mean the primitives from the Outer Rim? The ones who barely had fusion drives last time we checked. Confirmed, Commander, Kent said, his face going pale as he read his screen. Those are definitely human markings. Standard Earth alphabet. And I can read the ship designation. It says USNS Endeavour. Morgan felt something cold settle in her stomach. The last survey of Earth had been, 200 years ago? Maybe a bit less? The report had been clear. Humans were spacefaring barely. They had fusion drives, basic energy weapons, and primitive shields. They were classified as Level 2 civilization. Not dangerous. Not worth worrying about. This ship was impossible for Level 2 civilization. She activated the communications array, keeping her voice steady and authoritative. Unknown vessel, you have entered Vraxian Imperial space without authorization. Identify yourself immediately and state your intentions. Static crackled through the speakers. Then a voice came through, speaking perfect Vraxian trade language, though with an accent she'd never heard before. This is Captain James Mitchell of the United Solar Nations ship Endeavour. We're on a peaceful scientific expedition and formally request permission to pass through Imperial territory. We have no hostile intent and mean no harm to your people or property. Morgan glanced down at her tactical display. The human ship was still moving, still maintaining those impossible speeds. Speeds that would rip her flagship apart at the molecular level. Speeds that violated several laws of physics she'd learned in the academy. Captain Mitchell, she said slowly, choosing her words carefully, our records indicate that human technology should not be capable of the performance we're observing from your vessel. Please explain how you've achieved these capabilities. There was a pause. She could almost hear the human captain thinking on the other end. Then he responded, and she could hear the slight amusement in his voice. Yeah, well, we've made some improvements since your last visit. Look, Captain, we really don't want any trouble. We're just trying to pass through your space. There's a pulsar cluster on the other side that we're studying. We'll be through your territory in less than 2 days and then we'll be gone. Morgan's tactical officer, a veteran named Drake, leaned in close and whispered urgently. Commander, we have a problem. Our targeting sensors can't get a solid lock on them. It's like they're there but not there at the same time. Space itself seems bent around their hull. I've never seen anything like it. She looked at her sensor displays again. There was something else too, something her instruments were barely picking up. Deep inside the human ship's core there was a gravitational anomaly. A distortion in spacetime itself. Her sensors kept trying to measure it and failing, glitching out and resetting themselves. Morgan had fought in 3 wars. She'd defeated fleets twice the size of hers through clever tactics and raw determination. She'd stared down enemy commanders and never blinked. But right now, looking at this tiny human ship that somehow contained more power than her entire fleet, she felt something she hadn't felt in decades. Fear. All ships, go to battle stations, she ordered quietly. Raise shields. Charge weapons but do not lock on. Not yet. She turned to her communications officer. Give me a direct line to the Emperor. Priority 1. He needs to see this. Now. As her crew rushed to follow orders, Morgan kept her eyes on the human ship. It hung there in space, waiting patiently for a response. So small. So impossibly advanced. The humans had been dismissed as primitives, barely worth noticing. What had they become in just 200 years? And more importantly, what else was out there that the Vraxian Empire had been too arrogant to notice? The conference room aboard the Eternal Dominion was packed. Every important scientist in the Vraxian Empire had been pulled from their labs and rushed to the flagship. They crowded around holographic displays, arguing in hushed voices, pointing at data streams that made no sense. The Imperial Science Council had assembled in emergency session, and the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Chief Scientist Helen Carter stood at the center of it all, her eyes fixed on the scans of the human vessel. She was the Empire's leading expert on theoretical physics, had 3 doctorates, and had spent her entire life studying how the universe worked. Right now, everything she thought she knew was being challenged. Controlled singularities, she whispered, almost to herself. Then louder, her voice filled with disbelief. They're using controlled singularities for propulsion. Multiple ones. I count at least 6, maybe more. The room erupted in chaos. Scientists shouted over each other. Some called her crazy. Others demanded to see the data themselves. Admiral Tyler Ross, who just arrived with reinforcements, slammed his fist on the table so hard it made everyone jump. That's absolutely impossible. Do you understand what you're saying? We've been trying to harness singularity engines for 800 years. 800 years. Every single attempt ended in disaster. Ships torn apart. Test facilities destroyed. Entire research stations lost. We gave up on the technology because it simply cannot be done safely. Carter turned to face him, her hands shaking as she held up her data pad. I know what the records say, Admiral. I helped write some of them. But I'm reading this data correctly. Look at it yourself. Multiple microsingularities, perfectly balanced, working in harmony. They're generating a localized gravitational field that... She paused, her face going pale as the full implications hit her. Oh my God. They're not moving through space at all. They're making space move around them. The room went silent again. Every scientist there understood immediately what that meant. It wasn't just advanced propulsion. It was a fundamental reimagining of how movement through space worked. Commander Morgan, who'd been standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward. What about the hull? Our sensors can barely get readings on it. What are we looking at? Carter pulled up another set of displays, her fingers flying across the holographic controls. Exotic matter. That's the only explanation. The hull exists in a quantum state that shouldn't be stable in normal spacetime. According to every physics textbook we have, according to 3,000 years of accumulated scientific knowledge, that ship cannot exist. The materials it's made from violate the fundamental laws of reality as we understand them. But there it is, sitting right outside, as real as you or me. Admiral Ross moved to the view screen, staring at the small human vessel floating peacefully in the void. It looked so harmless, so small. But the readings said otherwise. He'd commanded fleets for 50 years. He'd won battles against impossible odds. Right now he felt completely out of his depth. Test their defenses, he ordered suddenly. Fire a warning shot. Not at them, just across their bow. Let's see what happens. Admiral, I'm not sure that's wise, Carter began. Do it, Ross commanded. The weapons officer hesitated for only a second before following orders. The Eternal Dominion's main plasma cannon began powering up, a weapon so powerful it could vaporize a small moon. Energy built up in the firing chamber, crackling with barely contained fury. Then it released. A bolt of superheated plasma streaked through space, bright enough to hurt the eyes even through the filtered view screen. It raced toward the human ship at a significant fraction of light speed. Everyone in the conference room held their breath. The plasma bolt curved. It bent around the human ship like water flowing around a rock, like light bending around a black hole. The massive blast of energy that should have at least forced them to raise shields simply missed entirely, curving away and dissipating harmlessly into empty space. Did they activate shields? Ross demanded, his voice tight. Did we detect any defensive systems coming online? Carter was frantically checking her instruments, her hands shaking worse than before. No. No energy signature at all. They didn't activate anything. They didn't do anything. Space itself is protecting them. The exotic matter hull is creating a natural gravitational lens effect. Anything that comes near them just bends away. Admiral, they don't need shields. Their ship is literally untouchable by conventional weapons. Captain Mitchell's voice crackled over the communication system, and he sounded genuinely annoyed now. Was that really necessary? We've been nothing but polite. We just want to pass through your territory. Did you really need to shoot at us? Admiral Ross ignored him, spinning to face his staff officers. Someone pull up the first contact records. I want everything we have on Earth. Every single report, every survey, every interaction. Now. A junior officer named David Cole practically threw himself at the archive terminal. His fingers flew across the keys as he searched through decades of stored data. Sir, I found something. 70 years ago, humanity made first contact with us. They sent a delegation to one of our outer colonies. According to the reports, they were eager, almost desperate to establish relations. What did they want? Morgan asked. Cole read from the ancient files. Technology exchanges. Cultural cooperation. Scientific partnerships. Educational programs. They wanted to learn from us, share with us. The delegation leader gave a speech about how humanity had always dreamed of finding other intelligent life, of joining a galactic community. What did we tell them? Carter asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew the answer. Cole's face was grim. The council reviewed their request and denied it. The official response classified them as too primitive and potentially dangerous. We refused all cooperation. He scrolled down further. Humanity's response is recorded here. It's short. Quote, "Thank you for considering our request. We understand your decision and respect your sovereignty. We'll figure it out ourselves." End quote. The council chamber went absolutely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Everyone there understood the implications. They'd rejected humanity. Dismissed them. Sent them away. Carter's hands were shaking as she pulled up humanity's technological progression curve from the database. She'd seen these kinds of graphs a million times. They usually showed steady, predictable advancement. Species improved gradually over centuries, building on what came before. The human curve was different. "Oh no," she whispered. "Oh no no no." "What?" Morgan demanded, moving closer to look at the display. "What is it?" Carter highlighted different sections of the graph with trembling fingers. "Look at their advancement curve. Before we made contact it was normal. Steady, predictable progress. They were developing at a rate consistent with other level 2 civilizations. But after we rejected them?" She zoomed in on a specific point in the timeline. The line suddenly shot upward, almost vertical. They unified their entire species within 5 years. Every nation, every government, every faction. They pooled all their resources into scientific research. Their scientific output increased by a factor of 50. 50 times as much research, development, and experimentation. That's impossible, Ross said, but his voice lacked conviction. They weren't advancing incrementally anymore, Carter continued, her voice growing stronger. They weren't playing it safe. They were brute-forcing every theoretical concept simultaneously. Every crazy idea, every impossible theory, every wild hypothesis that we dismissed as too dangerous or too impractical. They tested all of it. Most of it failed, obviously. But some of it. She gestured at the Endeavour floating on the view screen. Some of it worked. Ross stared at the data in horror. That's insane. That's reckless. They should have killed themselves a dozen times over. That's humanity, Carter said quietly. We spent 3,000 years making careful, incremental improvements to stable, proven technology. We played it safe. We followed the rules. They spent 70 years throwing everything at the wall to see what stuck. And apparently, enough of it stuck to make us look like primitives. Morgan felt something cold wash over her. She'd fought in wars. She'd faced enemy fleets that outnumbered her. She'd stared down alien commanders across negotiating tables. But this was different. This wasn't a military threat. This was something far more terrifying. They weren't facing an enemy. They were facing a species that had turned rejection into fuel. A species that had taken being told no, and used it to leapfrog 3,000 years of Vraxian advancement in less than a single human lifetime. Get me the Emperor, Morgan said quietly, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Tell him we have a serious problem. Tell him the galaxy just changed. 3 days later, the situation had escalated beyond anyone's worst nightmares. Admiral Robert Hayes arrived with the full might of the Vraxian Imperial Armada. 2,000 warships dropped out of hyperspace in a carefully coordinated maneuver that had taken months of planning during peacetime drills. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships, carriers, dreadnoughts. Every class of military vessel the Empire possessed, all arranged in a massive sphere surrounding the single human ship. It was the largest military mobilization in recorded Vraxian history. The kind of force they'd only assembled once before, during the Great War against the Krell Confederation 800 years ago. Back then, it had been enough to bring an entire rival empire to its knees. Now they were using it against one small vessel. The show of force was deliberate, calculated to be overwhelming and decisive. 2,000 against 1. The message was clear: surrender or be destroyed. Captain James Mitchell sat on the bridge of the Endeavour, rubbing his exhausted eyes. 3 days. 3 days of being detained, of increasingly aggressive scans, of threats barely disguised as official protocols. His crew of 12 looked tired and frustrated. They were scientists, explorers, not soldiers. They'd signed up for a routine survey mission to study pulsars, not to be held at gunpoint by an alien empire. "Sir, they're hailing us again," said his communications officer, Lieutenant Tom Bradford. Mitchell sighed. "Put them through." Admiral Hayes's voice boomed through the speakers, full of authority and barely contained anger. "Human vessel Endeavour, you are now completely surrounded by the Imperial Armada. You have no escape routes. Power down all your systems immediately and prepare to be boarded. We require a full inspection of your technology and a complete explanation for your illegal incursion into Imperial space. You have 5 minutes to comply." Mitchell looked around at his crew. They'd been away from home for 6 months. Their families were waiting on Earth, expecting news of their routine survey mission. Instead, they'd been stopped, detained, scanned, and now threatened with boarding by a hostile alien force. "Emily," Mitchell said to his first officer, Lieutenant Emily Stone, "I'm really tired of being polite to these people." Stone smiled, a dangerous glint in her eye. "Want me to show them why that's a bad idea, sir?" "Yeah," Mitchell said, sitting up straighter. "I think it's time. Show them." Stone's fingers danced across her console. "With absolute pleasure, Captain." She activated what the human fleet called a reality anchor, a device that stabilized dimensional boundaries and forced anything hidden in nearby pocket dimensions back into normal space. Space shimmered like a heat wave on a summer day. Then 50 more human vessels phased into existence, materializing all around the Imperial Armada like ghosts becoming solid. They appeared from nowhere, surrounding the 2,000 Vraxian warships from every angle, above and below, left and right. They'd been there the entire time, watching, waiting, hidden in dimensional pockets that Vraxian sensors couldn't even detect existed. Aboard the Eternal Dominion, every alarm system went off at once. The bridge erupted in chaos. Officers shouted over each other. Tactical displays lit up like Christmas trees, showing contacts appearing from impossible directions. Where did they come from? Admiral Hayes roared, gripping his command chair. How did they get past our sensors? Chief Scientist Carter was frantically running scans, her face pale with a mixture of wonder and absolute terror. They were already here, Admiral. They've been here the whole time. They were shifted slightly out of phase with normal spacetime, existing in dimensional pockets we didn't even know were possible to create. Our sensors were completely blind to them. We never had them surrounded. They had us surrounded. Commander Morgan stared at the tactical display, feeling her stomach drop. Each human ship was different from the others. Some were sleek and organic, looking like the Endeavour with those strange flowing curves. Others were geometric and crystalline, looking like they'd been carved from massive diamonds. A few seemed to flicker in and out of existence, there 1 second and gone the next. One ship appeared to be made of liquid metal that constantly flowed and reformed, its shape never quite the same twice. Mitchell's voice came through the communication system again, but the polite, requesting tone was gone. Now he sounded tired and annoyed, like a patient teacher who'd finally run out of patience with a difficult student. Admiral Hayes, this is getting ridiculous. We're scientists, not soldiers. We don't want to fight. We never wanted a fight. But you've kept us here for 3 days, running invasive scans, making threats, and treating us like criminals. Frankly, we have work to do, and you're wasting our time. You will submit to Imperial authority and, Hayes began, his voice shaking slightly. No, we won't, Mitchell interrupted flatly. Let me explain something to you, Admiral. Each of these 50 ships you're looking at is part of humanity's experimental fleet. We're testing different theoretical technologies. See that ship over there? The one that looks like it's made of crystal? That's the Prometheus. They're experimenting with timeline manipulation technologies. The one next to it, the Newton, is working on quantum probability engines. That big one over there, the Franklin, is testing controlled antimatter reactions in subspace pockets. That's impossible, Hayes said automatically, but his voice lacked any real conviction now. You keep using that word, Mitchell replied, and there was definitely amusement in his voice now. Impossible. You've said it about a dozen times in the past 3 days. I don't think it means what you think it means. Watch this. The ship designated Prometheus activated its experimental systems. Space around one of the Vraxian dreadnoughts began to shimmer and distort. Time itself bent. For everyone watching from outside, 3 seconds ticked by normally. But for the crew of that dreadnought, caught inside the localized temporal field, 3 full days passed in those 3 seconds. The effects were immediate and terrifying. The crew aged 72 hours in an instant. Hair and beards grew out. Uniforms became wrinkled and dirty. The crew members who'd shaved that morning now had stubble. Those who'd been awake found themselves suddenly exhausted, as if they hadn't slept in days. The ship's system showed 72 hours of normal wear and tear, power cells drained, air filters clogged with 3 days' worth of particulates. The temporal field collapsed, returning the dreadnought to normal time. The ship went dark, floating dead in space, its crew traumatized and confused, unable to understand what had just happened to them. We're still working out the kinks on that one, Mitchell said, and he actually sounded apologetic. The crew will be fine, just very confused and probably very hungry. We'll transmit medical data to help them recover. Nobody was hurt, Admiral. But I need you to understand something very clearly. The communications channel was silent. Everyone in the Imperial Armada was listening now. We came here peacefully, Mitchell continued. We asked politely to pass through your space. We explained our mission. We've been nothing but respectful, even when you treated us like criminals. But you need to understand that we're not the primitives you dismissed 70 years ago. We're not asking for permission anymore. We're informing you of our intentions. What do you want? Hayes asked, and his voice had lost all its authority. He sounded like a man who just realized he was holding a losing hand. The same thing we wanted 70 years ago when we first met you, Mitchell said. To pass through your space peacefully. To explore. To learn. To coexist. The only difference now is that you can't stop us. So here's what's going to happen, Admiral. We're going to continue our mission. Your fleet is going to let us pass. And then, when we're done with our survey, we're going to have a serious conversation about cooperation and mutual respect. Because we're not primitives anymore, and it's time you started treating us as equals. Admiral Hayes looked at Commander Morgan. She looked back at him and slowly shook her head. They both knew the truth now. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't even a confrontation. It was simply a statement of new reality. All ships, Hayes said quietly, his voice heavy with defeat, stand down. Let them pass. The human fleet began moving through the Vraxian formation like it was made of mist. And as they passed, Mitchell added one final comment that would echo through the Empire for years to come. Oh, and Admiral? We've already made peaceful contact with 17 other species you classified as primitive and not worth your time. Turns out when you help people instead of dismissing them, they're pretty eager to share ideas and work together. We're building something new out here. A real community. You're welcome to join us. Or you can stay isolated in your empire. Your choice. But either way, the galaxy just got a lot more interesting. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of tense silence, of emergency meetings behind closed doors, of an empire trying to figure out what to do when everything they thought they knew had been turned upside down. Then came the invitation. A formal request from Emperor Drell himself, asking Captain James Mitchell to visit the Vraxian homeworld for diplomatic talks. Mitchell's shuttle descended through the atmosphere of Vrax Prime, the heart of an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. He landed in the Grand Plaza, a massive courtyard where visiting dignitaries had arrived throughout history, usually with elaborate ceremonies, honor guards and diplomatic entourages numbering in the hundreds. Mitchell came alone. He stepped off his shuttle wearing a simple uniform, no medals or decorations, carrying nothing but a basic data pad. No guards, no advisors, no weapons. Just one human scientist turned explorer, standing in the center of a plaza designed to make visitors feel small and intimidated. A crowd had gathered. Thousands of Vraxians lined the plaza, watching in absolute silence. Word had spread throughout the Empire about the humans, about their impossible ships, about the fleet that had made the Imperial Armada stand down without firing a shot. Emperor Drell stood at the palace entrance, flanked by his entire court. Ministers, generals, advisors, scientists, everyone who mattered in the Vraxian government was there. And as Mitchell walked toward them, something happened that had never occurred in 3,000 years of Imperial history. The Emperor bowed. It wasn't a deep bow, but it was unmistakable. The ruler of the Vraxian Empire, descendant of conquerors and empire builders, acknowledged an equal. The crowd gasped. Some of the more traditional courtiers looked scandalized. Captain Mitchell, Emperor Drell said carefully, his voice steady despite the weight of what he'd just done. Thank you for accepting my invitation. I know you're a busy man with important work to do. Mitchell returned the bow, matching its depth exactly. Thank you for extending it, Your Majesty. Though I should mention we were passing through the system anyway. We're studying the binary star formation in the neighboring sector. Fascinating gravitational interactions. They walked through the palace halls together, the Emperor and the human captain, followed by a train of nervous courtiers. The walls were lined with portraits, 3,000 years of emperors, each one painted in full regalia, each one representing decades or centuries of unchallenged rule. Mitchell looked at them with genuine interest. That's a lot of history, he said quietly. Yes, Drell replied. Sometimes I wonder if it's too much history. If we've been so focused on preserving the past that we stopped thinking about the future. They reached a private chamber, smaller and more intimate than the grand halls. Chief Scientist Helen Carter was there, along with Commander Beth Morgan and Admiral Robert Hayes. They all looked tired, like they hadn't slept properly in weeks. Let's skip the diplomatic niceties, Drell said, sitting down heavily in a chair. The informal gesture surprised everyone. Emperors didn't usually sit casually. Let's be direct with each other. What do you want, Captain Mitchell? What does humanity want from us? Mitchell set his data pad on the table and sat down across from the Emperor. The exact same thing we wanted 70 years ago when we first made contact with your people. Cooperation. Exchange of ideas. Mutual growth and protection. Friendship. Partnership. A chance to learn from each other and work together. Admiral Hayes let out a bitter laugh. But now you don't need us. You've got technology that makes ours look primitive. You've got 50 experimental ships that can do things we can't even comprehend. You've made alliances with 17 other species. What could you possibly need from us? You're right, Mitchell said simply. We don't need you. Not in the way you mean. We don't need your protection. We don't need your technology. We're not coming to you as supplicants begging for help. He paused, looking each of them in the eye. But we'd still very much like to work with you. The universe is vast and strange and often terrifying. We keep finding things out there that scare us. Anomalies we can't explain. Phenomena that threaten entire star systems. Things that our fancy new technology can't solve alone. Having allies, having partners who understand things we don't, would be extremely valuable. Commander Morgan leaned forward. What could we possibly offer you? Be honest, Captain. Your technology is centuries ahead of ours. Maybe millennia. What can we give you that you can't get elsewhere or figure out yourselves? Mitchell smiled, and it was genuine, not diplomatic. Commander, you have 3,000 years of stable, reliable, proven technology. Systems that work consistently, that don't explode randomly, that have been tested across countless situations. We have 70 years of experimental technology that sometimes works brilliantly and sometimes catastrophically fails in ways that nearly destroy star systems. He stood up and started pacing, gesturing as he spoke, looking more like a professor giving a lecture than a diplomat. You have a massive, organized empire with infrastructure across 100 star systems. Jump gates, trade routes, communication networks, emergency response systems. We have 50 experimental ships and a homeworld that's still trying to figure out how to manage all these new capabilities we've developed. You have experience. You have wisdom. You have institutional knowledge spanning millennia. You've seen civilizations rise and fall. You know what mistakes to avoid. And what do you have? Carter asked quietly. We have enthusiasm, Mitchell said with a laugh. We have recklessness. We have a willingness to try things that sound impossible. We have fresh perspectives unconstrained by thousands of years of, this is how we've always done it. We have innovation happening so fast it sometimes scares us. He turned back to face them. Look, I'm a scientist, not a diplomat. I'm not good at pretty speeches or political maneuvering. So here's the honest truth. Humanity took your rejection 70 years ago very, very hard. It hurt. It felt like being told we weren't good enough, that we didn't matter, that we should just stay in our corner of the galaxy and not bother the important civilizations. The room was completely silent. We unified our entire species because you dismissed us, Mitchell continued, his voice growing more passionate. Every nation on Earth put aside their differences and worked together because we had a common goal. We innovated like crazy because you said we couldn't compete. We pushed every boundary we could find because you told us to stay in our place. And you know what? In a weird way, we're grateful. You motivated us. You gave us a challenge we couldn't ignore. But Emperor Drell prompted softly. Mitchell's expression grew serious. But now we're discovering that innovation without wisdom is genuinely dangerous. Last month, the research ship Tesla was testing a new quantum drive configuration. They accidentally created a self-sustaining quantum fluctuation that started tearing a hole in spacetime itself. It nearly collapsed an entire star system with 3 inhabited planets before we figured out how to shut it down. 30 billion people almost died because we were being too clever and not careful enough. He sat back down, suddenly looking tired. We need someone to tell us when we're being reckless. We need partners who've seen what happens when civilizations get too confident, too sure of themselves. We need the wisdom that comes from 3,000 years of experience. Emperor Drell studied Mitchell carefully. And if we refuse this partnership? If we choose to remain separate? Then you watch from the sidelines while humanity and our new partners reshape the galaxy, Mitchell said with a shrug. No threats. No violence. No economic pressure or political manipulation. We'll just continue doing what we're doing, and you'll become less and less relevant as time goes on. Eventually, you'll be that ancient empire that used to matter before the galaxy changed around you. But I don't think you want that. I don't think that's who you really are. You don't know us, Hayes said defensively. Maybe not, Mitchell agreed. But I think you're better than the empire that rejected us 70 years ago. I think you can adapt. I think you can evolve. I think deep down you know the old way isn't working anymore. The room fell silent again. Everyone was processing what Mitchell had said. Finally, Chief Scientist Carter spoke up, her voice thoughtful. What exactly are you proposing, Captain? What would this partnership look like in practical terms? Mitchell pulled up his data pad and activated a holographic display. We've already established something with our other partners. We call it the cooperative network. Not an empire, not a federation with hierarchies and power structures. Just species working together voluntarily. Sharing knowledge freely. Protecting each other. Making decisions collectively. The hologram showed a complex web of connections between different species, research stations, shared facilities. Right now we have 18 member species including us, Mitchell continued. We share all scientific research openly. We have joint research stations studying things none of us could tackle alone. We have mutual defense agreements. We're planning to build a massive sensor network that will give us early warning of cosmic threats. And we're establishing educational exchanges, Scientists and students traveling between worlds, learning from each other. And you want us to join this network? Commander Morgan asked. We want you to help lead it, Mitchell corrected. You have the resources, the infrastructure, the experience. If you're willing to let go of the Empire model, if you're willing to treat other species as genuine equals instead of subjects or primitives, you could be invaluable to what we're building. Emperor Drell stood and walked to the window, looking out over his capital city. 3,000 years of history. 3,000 years of dominance. 3,000 years of an empire that had just been offered a chance to become something different. What if we say yes? He asked quietly. What happens next? Mitchell smiled. Then tomorrow you send a delegation of your best scientists to attend the network symposium on Kepler Station. There's a young researcher named Dr. Lisa Chen presenting preliminary findings on faster-than-light communication using quantum entanglement across dimensional boundaries. Hayes actually laughed, though it sounded pained. Our top physicists concluded that was fundamentally impossible just 3 months ago. Wrote a whole paper about why it could never work. Lots of things are impossible, Mitchell said cheerfully, until someone does them anyway. That's what your empire forgot somewhere along the way. You got comfortable. You stopped dreaming big. You stopped taking risks. But it's not too late. You can start again. You can be part of something new. Emperor Drell turned from the window. For a long moment he just stood there, and Mitchell could see the weight of 3,000 years of history pressing down on him. Then slowly, deliberately, the Emperor extended his hand in the human gesture Mitchell had taught him. Then let's build this future together, Captain. Fair warning though, our bureaucracy moves slowly. This is going to be complicated. Mitchell shook his hand firmly, grinning. Welcome to the cooperative network, Your Majesty. And don't worry about complicated. Wait until you meet the synthoids. They think in 17 dimensions simultaneously and communicate in mathematical equations. Makes diplomatic negotiations really interesting. 3 months later, the Vraxian Empire formally dissolved itself. The government reorganized as the Vraxian Commonwealth and officially joined the cooperative network as an equal member. Their scientists flooded into joint research programs. Their engineers collaborated on projects that had been theoretical dreams just months before. Their military became a peacekeeping force, protecting dozens of species who'd once been dismissed as unworthy of notice. And 5 years later, when the real threat arrived, something ancient and vast and hungry that had been sleeping in the void between galaxies, something that viewed all biological life as resources to be consumed, humanity and the Vraxians stood together with all their partners. They fought with impossible technology and centuries of accumulated wisdom, with innovation and experience working side by side. The universe they discovered together was far more terrifying and wonderful than any of them had imagined. But they faced it as partners, as equals, as friends. Captain Mitchell, now Admiral Mitchell, liked to tell new species joining the network, nothing motivates humans quite like being told something is impossible. But you know what's even better? Having friends to help you prove the impossible wrong. That's when the real magic happens. And the galaxy, forever changed, continued spinning through the cosmos, full of species who'd learned that cooperation was stronger than empire, that sharing was better than hoarding, and that the word, impossible, was really just an invitation to try harder.